Hello, welcome to Books and Brews,
the place where beer and literature meet.
with your host, the seer of the beer, Chris Powell.
And Laura Vosica, author of the Bluebells Chronicles.
Each month, we invite a guest author to read their words and talk about writing while sipping beer specially paired with their work.
This month's guest is Benjamin Schwarting. So sit back
Pop a cold one
and dive into some books.
and brews.
Welcome to Books and Brews, episode number 86, with Benjamin Schwarting. So, Laura, what have you done this month?
Well, I screwed up hitting record.
So I understand.
This is why I'm not an AV tech. I had to I had to clean the driveway really well because I know how sensitive your nose is. We had this egg that it wasn't going to be eaten, so I threw it towards Boo Bear, figuring he would like it. Boo Bear is our dog who looks like a Yeti. And once again, it's like, this is why I don't play baseball. I went, "Ping," and it fell like 2 feet from me all over the driveway. Other than that, my month's been good. We've had a wedding, we've had a graduation, we've had new bunnies, we've moved chickens around because a few of them are getting the feathers scratched off their back. And we think it's because we have too many roosters for the number of hens. So you should have about 7 hens per rooster, and we don't. We have about 3.5 hens per rooster. And all of a sudden it's becoming a problem. So Marshall and I got to chase around hens. Mostly Marshall did it because he's good at it and I'm not. I'm working on 220 BC with Kendall Price. So for those who remember 221, we're finally on to the sequel. And
I don't remember 221 BC. I was very young at that time.
well, you were 6 years older than me. So how old does that make me? And then I've been making a lot of soap. And so we've got donkey's milk, we've got goat's milk, we've got different, I was going to say flavors, but I don't think you really want to eat this. We have different colors, different scents. So I've been very busy with that, and that's pretty fun.
Yes. Have you read anything at the same time you've been doing all this hard work?
Why, yes. Many other people may love this book. It's about a young man, 21, who happens to be in the wrong place at the wrong time and therefore ends up accused, probably falsely, of murder. And just before he is sent off to prison to await death, the prosecutor says his life is worth less than a hog's. And so the school teacher is supposed to go to the prison and meet with him and convince him he's not a hog, to die respecting himself as a man. I quit reading it because I couldn't stand the school teacher. He's not nice to his students. He's not really that nice to this young man in the prison. He's sleeping with a married woman, and he spends the whole book so far just in self-pity. Just got tired of it. I'm like, you can go sit in a corner and be sorry for yourself by yourself. You don't need me.
I have to think about this analogy, though. I mean, hogs' lives are worth quite a bit. I mean, that's where we get
true.
bacon from.
That's true.
So,
I'd write it differently. But this one I am enjoying. This is called The Poisonwood Bible by Barbara Kingsolver. And it's about a family you know what? This is funny. I think both of these books are set in the 1950s now that I think about it. And it's about a missionary family who goes to the Congo, and about each of their different thoughts about the faith that their father is trying to spread. And he's a Baptist minister, I think, and about the people around them and their lives and so on. So I'm not really sure where it's going to end up. I think that there's a tragedy coming and probably going to test their faith and all. But I am enjoying that one. And in fact, that's the reason I'm not coming to bed till 2 a.m. So you can file your complaints with Barbara. Tell her, writing such a darn good book.
I'm going to channel the great Karnak and think that we have a very interesting guest this month.
We do. Congratulations, Benjamin, on not being the first boring guest. Benjamin Schwarting is a fantasy author, high school English teacher, and co-owner of Williams and Rose Publishing. He is the author of the Sum of Ages series and the Daughters of the Storm prequel series. Ben's work emphasizes writing complex fantasy cultures that highlight real-world issues of systemic oppression and social injustice. I'm thinking, in fact, Benjamin, that you would probably like the book that I just referenced because it very much is about social injustice and the question of whether this young man ever had a chance in this trial. So after earning his MAT, Ben has taught as an adjunct professor of education at the College of Idaho and designed creative writing and young authors courses for high schoolers. So welcome. We are ready for drink number 1.
Well, I thought based upon the reading that we've got, and that a Vieux Carre would be a nice drink to start off with. This is a very traditional drink, and one that has a number of interesting flavors in it, starting with Benedictine, but we actually have some rye whiskey that we start with. So I thought based upon all the authorial stuff we have going on here that a Hemingway rye would be very nice to start off with. And just a bit of the rye whiskey. Then we move on to cognac, and I happen to have some white cognac here, which has got a nice flavor I find that works well in a number of these drinks. Then we move on to some sweet vermouth, as in contrast to the dry vermouth. So this is going to give the drink a bit of a sweeter flavor rather than that kind of airy flavor you might get in a martini with dry vermouth. And then on to Benedictine. And we're only going to put a bit of the Benedictine in here, just a teaspoon.
Is the Benedictine the one that has all the herbs that
Yes.
was made?
And so with this, we're getting also a couple of dashes of both Peychaud's bitters and Angostura bitters. And so this is really compounding the floral aspect of the drink. We're not going to shake this drink. We're going to stir it until the drink is well chilled with all those flavors in there. It helps to take them a bit down from room temperature into a bit more of a chill in that it won't overwhelm your taste buds. So now I will strain that into a couple of glasses. And in the last part of the mixing, I will take some lemon and express some of the lemon oil into the drink before I serve it with a little bit of a lemon wedge on the side. And here you go with a Vieux Carre.
Cheers.
Talking about monks.
That's strong. It tastes a little bit like medicine to me.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So I don't know if that means that medicine tastes really good or
If my medicine tasted
really
like this,
bad.
I would have resisted medicine a lot less when I was younger.
If your mother was giving you this as medicine, we'd have other questions.
I'd probably feel a lot better about whatever was making me sick.
I think it would have to be the right day for me to really enjoy this. It's a drink that some days I'd really like. Today it feels a little bit strong. I think maybe on a cold day or cold night.
Yes.
That's when I think I would enjoy this.
Very good.
Go
Reading
ahead.
number 1.
Just for a touch of context before diving in. This is the first book in my prequel trilogy. I am a fantasy writer, which means I am an over writer. And when I wrote my first series, I decided to write a reader magnet, just 2,000, 3,000 words. And that turned into 30,000, then 100,000, and the first of a trilogy, and it became its own thing. And so this is the first of that. And it deals with a fantasy race that the culture is strongly based off of Southeast Asian, a lot of Thai, Filipino, even some Indian subcontinent. They're an aquatic race. They're not underwater like marine mammals, I guess you could say. So they have webbed fingers, counter shading on their bodies. So that's the context here.
Very good.
The decorative metal side of the temple shrieked as Alenka's fins slid across it. The whole temple of lights was built like an immense conch shell, its walls as smooth and bright as nacre, its conical shape twisting upwards to heaven. Alenka had always hated the gaudy, but conveniently enough, the great silver swirl in its facade passed directly beneath the windows to the Sance chambers. It was the perfect escape route, but crushing depths. It was slick. Even crouched on all fours, she was barely able to keep her webbed feet beneath her. And the noise, tides be good, it made so much noise. She pled to the sea around her that no one would hear. frantically muttering under her breath for the great gracious depths to swallow up the treacherous sounds of her escape. But it was no use. She would have prayed for heaven's aid, but she doubted heaven had much mercy for blasphemous little minnows trying to outswim their fate, especially not ones who were fated to serve heaven. To deny the caste established by your Kudori mark was heresy. But Alenka didn't care what the lines on her brow supposedly foretold. The conclave could go swallow seawater for all she cared. She'd finally had enough. She was done with monks, done with sant training, and done letting the silly little pattern on her silly little forehead anchor her to a future she hated. So believing she had nothing to lose and everything to gain, Alenka was running away. Sure, she'd run off before, but this time was different. This time she was not coming back. This time she was going to the surface. With nothing but rage to fill her sails, Alenka crept forward as best she could. She moved slowly on her rump and heels, utterly unaided by the divine, and cringing at the squealing temple walls, selling her out with each screeching centimeter she descended. Treacherous snake of a building. Even the architecture was against her, it seemed. If she didn't hurry, every kata in the great hall would wander around back to investigate why the Temple of Light was wailing like a stuck paloma. She'd be found out before she even left the temple. How embarrassing. She hadn't had an escape attempt that bad since she was a guppy. But at last, she came skidding to a silent, blessed halt at the ornamented rim of the temple's roof. She studied the stone street below. Her eyes darted back and forth as she anxiously tried watching every window and door frame and corner all at once. As far as she could tell, nothing had moved. The holy city was still asleep. Well, the lower half at least. Who knew what was happening topside? Certainly not Alenka. All around and above her, the polished stone expanse of Lunsod Sadaget filled her view. It was not a city of buildings, but of bridges, spires, and tunnels. Everything had been carved directly into the bedrock of the island hundreds of years ago. It sat so deep within the sea that most sunlight was swallowed up by the depths. But still, the holy city shone. The light of Panaying illuminated thousands of swirling wall etchings that decorated every stone surface like an endless electric blue tattoo. Beyond the buildings, she could see the distant shimmers of the shield, that great bubble of light keeping the crushing depths at bay. The sea stone, Panaying was its proper name, was seated in its altar beneath the temple, powering it all. Grudgingly, she had to admit the magic of it. A single drop of the Silver River, sent to save them from the ancient yokai calamity. An underwater city kept dry by a spherical wall of heaven's light. She supposed it was all rather fantastic, romantic even. But these damp halls and spires were all Alenka had ever known. And whatever magic they held made no difference to her. A beautiful prison was still a prison.
I find your text very poetic, and it's accentuated by your reading voice. I mean, I was thinking about this endless electric blue tattoo, and I was just thinking that's just marvelous. I love how that was expressed.
Yeah, it was beautiful. I did read some of the samples on Amazon and in your excerpts too. And I just love the way you've turned all these idioms and oaths into sea language, like, oh, go swallow seawater. And you have so many of those. Did those just pop into your head naturally?
It was a lot of work. So when I was in college, taking all the courses for being an English teacher, one of the required classes is linguistics. Utterly useless, I thought. Like, teach me how to teach junior high kids grammar, right? Like,
Right.
But this linguistics course gave me such an interesting insight to how languages grow and evolve and change. Something like pidgin and what a Creole actually were. When I heard about Hawaiian pidgin or Louisiana Creole, I didn't realize that those were concepts. A pidgin is a language that's a blend of multiple ones that people speak at work, like if they're working on the docks with people from different cultures. And a Creole is when that pidgin becomes someone's main native language, like they grow up speaking it. And my culture here, they speak Creole of Thai, Tagalog, Japanese, and depending what aspect of society it is, there'll be different words. So a lot of the religious words come from Thai. A lot of the Japanese ones come into like for bushi, for example, they use for warrior. And so I spent way too much time researching these different
Languages are quite fascinating. Each of us has a daughter who majored in, well, compared to your, Emily majored in linguistics.
Yes.
And my daughter actually has a PhD that she focused on how we acquire second languages, which to me is fascinating. I've got an entire shelf full of language books, probably we say 8 different languages, probably more than that. I've got like Old English, Middle English, Latin, modern languages. I love languages. But one fascinating thing, and this kind of speaks to what you just said, is I've read that the language you speak actually shapes the thoughts that you're capable of having. And is it in 1942, I'm sorry, I'm saying 1904, that he speaks to the fact that they've narrowed language down so few words, exactly for that reason, so that you can't have thoughts that they don't want you to have, because you simply don't even have the words.
Other point, by the way, about hidden languages and kind of melding languages. My daughter Emily, when she was in undergrad, studied Portuguese and also Basque, which you might think is maybe the original Pidgin language, it's a very ancient language, and a kind of a melding of some ancient French and Spanish and other things came through, but ended up being very different. And so she studied that as well as Spanish, and minored actually in a number of those. So I found about that to be very apropos of a lot of different things, and it's very neat that you were able to leverage your course in that regard.
Now, I think you're reading Daughters of the Storm. Okay, and is that a prequel to the first series you wrote?
Yeah, so my main series, The Sum of Ages, it goes back and forth between two perspectives. They're two very different fantasy cultures and two very different environments. One is land-based, with Kalaks, they live on a city out on the plains. And then the other one are like this aquatic race that I mentioned here. And I just got so much great feedback about this group. I had a little trio of female characters that were just so much fun to write. And I had quite a few people ask me, like, I wanted to see some of their swashbuckling, their shenanigans. How did they meet? What happened here? And so I decided to go back and do kind of a found family coming of age.
You base it a lot on, as you just said, the various Asian cultures. Do you have some tie to that, or is that just an interest of yours?
It's, I would say, a blend of obsession and experience. I grew up, I think like David Attenborough is my spirit animal. I grew up watching all these BBC documentaries and sitting with my grandfather. And then as a teacher, I've taken so many courses on including voices of color and indigenous voices into the curriculum. I've also led trips abroad for students. Last year I took a group of kids to Japan for 9 days. If you think teaching in school is scary, try taking a group of a dozen, students through the Tokyo subway system.
And hoping you don't lose any.
And I say that, but like I got to give Japan its credit. Like the Tokyo subway system runs better than any system in the United States. It is shocking. It is clean. It is silent. It is orderly. I grew up in New York originally, and so when I hear subway, I still have like PTSD.
Did you grow up in New York City?
Long Island.
Long Island, okay, or Long Island, as we say.
Long Island, yeah.
I have to laugh. My older daughter actually went to college in New York City, in Manhattan, and she knew people from Long Island who knew all about Minnesota, all about Minneapolis. They had literally never left Long Island, and they knew that people in Minnesota all dress like Paul Bunyan. They knew that we have no cities. They knew we had no electricity. They knew we had no running water. What was the other one? They knew it all. And my daughter was like, have you ever been there? We have cities. I'm like, no, you don't. They had literally never left Long Island, but they just knew that they knew. It was very shocking to me. I'll just say that.
They've also never been to the Statue of Liberty. They've also never been to the Empire State Building. They've never been.
That's what shocked me so much. Yeah.
I'm originally from New Jersey and upstate New York, actually near the Binghamton area. So I know a lot, and I went to school way up in Potsdam, New York. All the way up at the top of
Yeah.
the state. So
It's just interesting the experiences people have and what we know and what we think we know.
yeah,
So what was the original spark for, you started with The Sum of Ages. What was the spark for that series?
Oh my goodness. So there's a fantasy author, Brandon Sanderson, and he wrote this book, Mistborn, and he was so proud of himself, and he was, like, it's so original. I love it so much. And then a fan came up and said, "I love your book. It's like a world full of Magneto from X-Men." And like the blood drained from his face, and he went, "Oh no, I'm a hack. Oh my gosh," right? I had a very similar experience. One of my former students, read one of the like smuggled copies of the early manuscripts that I'd clandestinely slipped out of the copy room at the school, using up my school's copies illicitly, right? He read it and was thrilled and wanted to see the next one. He was like, it's great. It's just like Zelda." And I was like, "Bud, you're kidding. You ruined my book." Because I realized I grew up playing all these nerdy video games, Nintendo and PlayStation, and loving all these different fantasy cultures and Final Fantasy and Zelda. And I realized in Zelda, there's like this mountain race called the Gorons, and then there's this aquatic race called the Zora. And I went, "Oh crap." It was very weird.
And so that inspired you to write The Sum of Ages?
I think subconsciously. It is an amalgamation of, everything that you create is everything you consume. It comes out in different ways.
Yeah.
I mentioned I've loved exploring other cultures. I've loved traveling the world. I remember, like, when I was a kid, I got to travel abroad. And I remember the first time I walked out of a plane into China.
Wow.
Plane into Shanghai, and nothing smelled the same and nothing sounded the same, and I couldn't read anything, and no one looked like me, and it was beautiful. It was amazing, just that shock. And I felt like in fantasy especially, Tolkien was brilliant and set the stage, but there's so much room to expand, to explore other ideas and cultures and originality. I didn't want to just, like, I love Europe and I love medieval culture, but I didn't want to be just another Tolkien clone.
we had that same feeling when we visited Australia, by the way. It's just like, seems like the rest of the world, and yet every plant and every animal is completely foreign,
Right.
to every concept of anything we
Right.
do.
In a way, my experience was the complete opposite, that I lived in Germany until I was almost 6. And so for me, the culture shock was actually coming to America. And in a lot of ways, Germany, America, a lot of our culture is similar, but there definitely was, coming to America was like, that to me was different. And so just coming the opposite way, how do you go about world building and creating this whole universe that's different from ours?
There's a world building theory that I teach in a lot of my creative writing workshops. And I think about it as a cascade of consequences. I think new authors, they get an idea and they're obsessed with this idea. And this idea is precious to them. It's their baby and it's sacred, and it's not enough to make an entire book. It's a single idea. And they think the idea is a little bit more unique and original than maybe it actually is. And I'm guilty of this. I think we all are at different points. But an author once heard say, books aren't made of ideas, they're made of words, right? And ideas are a dime a dozen. And you have to actually build the book. And then he went on to say, it's like, actually, that's kind of a lie, because books are actually about 5 or 6 ideas.
Okay.
And the intricacy is exploring how those ideas connect, how they twist and change and evolve on each other, right? And so,
this is interesting. I've talked to a lot of authors. I've done a lot of reading on writing, and I've never actually heard that idea. That's fascinating. And it makes me wonder, what can I find in my own work?
Yeah, and it's really fun to like take one of your favorite books and try to break down, like, what were the 5 ideas that clearly inspired this. Like Tolkien, for example, right? I mean, hopefully most of us know Lord of the Rings at this point. He wanted to build an actual fantasy culture with languages and maps and atlases and histories, right? He was also obsessed with mythology and fairy tales, and he felt like England didn't really have like an origin story fairy tale. He loved Norse mythology, like the 9 realms and the elves and the dwarves. He really, really loved the hero's journey, right? This is pre-hero, he loved this idea of like Beowulf and these epic heroes from history, but he wanted to flip it on its ear. He wanted to say, like, what if the hero was the little guy? What if the hero didn't save the world with a sword? What if he saved it with a hiking trip, right? And as you see these different ideas converge, it's the Lord of the Rings, right? And the complexity that comes out of these ideas is what makes it so rich, And I thought a lot about in my books, what were those 5 ideas? I think I mentioned one. I wanted original fantasy cultures based on more than just Europe. I love looking at religion and philosophy and faith. I wanted to kind of deconstruct it a little bit, like looking at all the similarities of all these different religions. What do they have in common, and what's like the collective truth that we can all agree on here?
His writing actually wrote the book on it. It's done
On first principles.
Yeah.
It takes a look at moral systems through 10,000 years of human history and charts the parallels among them. It's been quite fascinating as a journey in that.
Right, how they all teach the same thing, like we're ingrained as humans. But
One of the things that I find very fascinating about what you said about the story ideas that authors have, that there are their babies and the 5 ideas and all of that, you would find that there's actually a tremendous parallel in that, and how startup businesses, especially in high tech, are founded. And it's the same dynamic you were just talking about is exactly what you see in startup businesses. I do a lot with venture investing and things like that, so I'm confronting this on a daily basis. I would be fascinated to learn more about your ideas in this regard, because I just thought there was a rich load of what you were just talking about there that is relevant to that. You could have a lot of good advice for startup companies as well as authors.
we need to move on to drink 2. Need to get to.
And here with reading 2, we have a dark and stormy. I thought was going to be very illustrative for the context of reading number 2. Normally this would be in a highball glass, but I figured for the type of context that we have a bit more of a snifter type of a glass. And I'm going to start by putting some ice in the snifter. Then I'm going to add some ginger beer. And this is different. Ginger beer has a much spicier kind of a flavor profile. Many people think they can substitute ginger ale, and it's really not. Ginger ale is sweet, and ginger beer has got that kind of spicier aspect. So I put in about 3 to 5 ounces. I then add just a touch of lime juice to give it a little bit of brightness. Not much. You can add up to about a ½ ounce for this, but just going to put a little bit in. And then now I'm going to take black spiced rum. It's called the Kraken. This is kind of similar to the British Navy ration, which was rum that was called Black Tot. And we've had some of that. They've discovered some cases of it that had been aging for many, many years since they stopped giving British sailors their rum ration in about the 1940s or so, if I remember correctly. So we're going to take this and gently float this on top of the ginger beer in an attempt to try to create a bit of a layer. And some of that is not working quite right, but we'll see how this comes out. So it's actually not going to be mixed so much as just have the rum added to the ginger beer with a touch of lime. So here is kind of the original version of a dark and stormy. Cheers.
Cheers.
Oh, that's got a set of deep flavors.
It's strong too.
It's, yes, that spiced dark rum along with that very zippy ginger beer flavor.
Yes.
Is very neat.
One of the reasons this was included on the list was because it's something sailors would have drunk, in part because the ginger is settling to the stomach. So sailors would have this to help settle the stomach.
And the lime, of course, being called limeys, they would have their vitamin C,
right,
which would also, prevent scurvy.
Yes.
So
the context here, this is a little later on, and this is Alenka's attempt to actually escape this underwater city. And there are shipping domes that they use to get goods from underwater way up into the surface. And they're called dikya, which is actually, I think it was a Tagalog word, but it's the word for jellyfish. And they kind of look like that. They have the air metal dome with a bamboo frame and then weighted ballasts around the outside. And they load it up from the inside. And then they use actually a pod of dolphins to help carry it up, to pull it to the surface. And so she gets the truly horrifically stupid idea to try to sneak aboard one of these. As soon as the lid closed above her, Alenka knew she'd made a mistake. The chest wasn't even a full meter long, and her legs were crushed so tight into her belly that her cheeks were pressed against her knees. She sat there in the dark for a long time, trying to control her breathing, trying to steady her nerves. She hoped that it was just the echo of the box that made her breath sound so loud. She hoped that she wasn't going to drown. A part of her hoped she hadn't actually picked the right box and that she'd be able to climb back out as soon as the dikya workers were gone. And still, she waited. Just when she was ready to give up and lift the lid, the chest jerked forward. Its wooden bottom scraping against the stone floor sent a sound like wailing yokai through the box. Alenka managed to suppress her startled scream down to a pinched squeak. "Lightning, this thing's heavy," the voice grumbled from outside. "Hey, come help me lift this one, will ya?" The chest rose, and Alenka felt her stomach roll inside. There was almost no light in the box, but the lid lightly snapped open and shut with each of the kata's steps, like a scallop venting its mantle. It wasn't much, but the motion let in just enough of the surrounding blue glow to let Alenka know that they'd made it to the dikya pool. She heard splashing, sloshing, and a considerable amount of grunting, and the chest was finally shoved up into the watertight dome. Alenka peered through the hairline opening, watching one of the kata workers fuss with the wares one last time, ensuring everything was secure. He circled the shipping ring, tightening a few straps and ropes, shifting a few boxes farther back. But when he turned to Alenka's chest, he paused. Alenka's blood went cold as she stared into the kata's furrowed brows. "What in heaven's name?" he muttered. In one quick motion, the kata pressed down on the lid and slipped the latch shut. As the metal locked into place, the wooden top was squeezed down onto the woven padding lining the chest's lid, making the chamber totally watertight. Alenka's world was suddenly perfectly black. "It wasn't even latched," the kata complained outside the chest. His voice was so muffled through the sealed lid that he might as well have been speaking underwater. "Crushing depths, those pups at the temple are getting sloppy. All right, boys, she's ready to drop." Alenka's heart was racing. The horror of her predicament sending wild, frantic chills from her face to her fins, and she did her best to not gasp away her suddenly limited supply of air. It lurched as the braces were removed, and with the cry of a few cranking gears, the shipping dome dropped against the pool's surface. The sensation of the fall was so sickening that Alenka nearly barfed all over the crushed scrolls beneath her. She heard the kata clambering about around the edge, fitting ballasts onto their hooks, and slowly the dome began to sink. "Heaven help me," Alenka mumbled miserably to herself.
Very poetic.
I thought you did a great job with this. And of course, I read further in this because I was reading the sample, and you really, really captured the horror being trapped in this place and trying to get out. What do you, as an author, do to really get inside the head? I mean, I'm assuming you've never been trapped in a chest like this. I'm hoping you haven't. You know, we as authors, we write many things. I mean, I write medieval battles. I've never been in a medieval battle. I don't even like riding horses. I mean, I do, but they scare the heck out of me. How do you get into the head of people in situations, or in this case, females, or people of entirely different cultures? What do you do to get into these situations in their heads?
Yeah, one of my favorite writing craft books is Steering the Craft by Ursula K. Le Guin. She's brilliant. And she talks about how, as an author, you might think you're a method actor, you need to have to slip into the skin of all these different people to experience life the way they do in order to be able to write from their perspective. She said it's not really that way. It's about curiosity, about empathy, about caring enough about someone else's experience to really sit with it. So I do a tremendous amount of research. I watch documentaries and podcasts about diving accidents and people that got the bends and the bubbles in their blood and all that kind of stuff. And I'm sure I'm on like 17 FBI.
I think most authors are.
Yeah.
The things I've looked up, yeah. In fact, I've had AI a couple of times tell me, I can't tell you
can't do
that.
that.
And then I go, but it's for a novel. And then AI goes, oh, here's how you murder someone in a horrible fashion. I'm like, it's that easy? That's kind of scary. At the same time, I need the information. But go ahead.
How long does it take for a house to burn down? You know, how much blood is in the human body, right? Just
Yes. You write, and I think, is it the same in Some of Ages that it's primarily female characters, or is that mainly for Daughters of the Storm?
The Son of Ages is a pretty even split.
Okay.
When we wrote Daughters of the Storm, I intentionally was trying to challenge myself to just absolutely crush the Bechtold test after my wife told me about it.
Explain that test. I've never heard of that.
Yeah, so Bechtold was a feminist literary critic, and she said one of the easiest ways to quickly evaluate representation of female characters in a work is take all the dialogue and sort it into two categories. Category one is when women are speaking to other women, and they're not speaking about a man. They're speaking to another woman about something other than a man. And then the other categories, like men speaking to each other, women speaking to men, women speaking about a man. And it's a really simple one. You wouldn't think it's that significant, but if you look at most popular movies, books, you'll realize, wow, there's a cast of about 9 main characters. 2 of them are women, 7 of them are men. The men are doing almost everything in the story, and at the times the women show up, it's to emphasize how cool and smart and handsome the men are, right? I mean, every James Bond movie is especially.
Isn't that why I'm in your life? Oh, also to scoop rabbit poop.
Well, there is that. Yeah.
I'm kidding. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, that's it. So I just, I really wanted to just really radically, drastically represent these female characters in my story. You know, I wanted it to.
So you called it the Bechtold test. Is it you're seeing, do the women in the book talk about anything other than men?
Yeah. So the Bechtold test is about how often do the women in the story have authentic human conversations with each other, right? Not just talking about the male characters or to the male characters, but that they have hearts and passions and plots of their own.
Do you run these scenes by writers group or by your wife or beta readers, or what do you base your depictions of women on, like just knowing women? And the reason I'm asking this is because when I was in a writers group, I actually do write primarily men, and I think that we live in a world where a lot of people will criticize a man for writing women, but they're not going to say anything to me about the fact that I write men. And it's like, well, it's the same thing, same difference. But
She does have 7 sons.
I do.
So-
I do. Believe me, I know something about male energy. Also, I grew up playing trombone, and I played well into my 30s. So I spent a lot of time around men. And even so, when I'm writing men, both the modern trombonist and the medieval warrior, there were times, not often, but there were definitely times when the men in my writers group would say, men don't talk like that. They just don't. And to me, it would be a perfectly normal phrasing, and they would be very insistent. A man would never phrase it that way. He might say that thing, but he wouldn't say it that way. So I'm just curious if you ever got that kind of feedback, or, you know, how that worked.
Yeah, I mean, so I have 3 things that come to mind. The first is definitely have done writers groups, beta readers, ARC readers, number one of which has always been my wife, right? She's kind of been the feminist editor that checks things first. The second is, as a teacher, I spend so much time with a huge array of students, right? Boys and girls, right? And I try really hard as I'm writing my characters to think about my students and to think about the way they think, feel, and talk. And I think that's guided my process a lot. And then the third thing I would say is, of course, there's times I got it wrong. Of course, there's times I got it right.
Mhm.
I would try and get it wrong than not to have tried at all. And I think that a lot of authors,
I think that's a good philosophy.
yeah, I think a lot of authors are really scared of doing it wrong. And so what we end up doing is perpetuating the status quo in our writing. We write what is safe and normal and right. And so then we erase the richness of humanity. You know, we erase these voices that deserve to have space in our work because we're scared of getting it wrong. I think that you need to accept that you're going to get it wrong a few times, but that's part of the process.
Right. Well, and I think too, I love what you said about fear leading us to erase a part of humanity, because again, speaking to the world we live in, there are very strong ideas, very strong emotions, very strong opinions about, let's take one example. Women should be strong and independent and this, that, and the other. Okay, well, what does it mean to be a strong, independent woman? Does it mean being very aggressive in a business suit and stiletto heels? Does it mean being out on the farm, not minding if you get trampled by a ram? Not that I speak from experience. Or does it mean having very traditional values and being strong enough to live those in a world that doesn't accept them? You know, what does it mean? There are different ways of being strong and independent, and some of them are presented as correct, and some of them are looked down on, to be honest. And so I love what you're saying about there's a whole wealth of experiences and portraying them and not being afraid that somebody's going to object to them. I think we get to go on to drink number 3.
And this is the Fish House Punch. This is a drink that dates back to the 1700s and a pub in Schuylkill, New York. And even to know how to pronounce Schuylkill, amongst a number of the other Dutch names that are in New York, of course. But we're going to start off. This is a very traditional drink, and one that is a bit reminiscent of a number of drinks that we've had on this podcast, including the Sailor's Flip, which was the Flip. It was an interesting, it's actually a heated cocktail that was George Washington's favorite, and it dates back to that kind of time frame. So we're kind of going back in time for this. And what we're going to, again, start off with is our wonderful Kraken dark rum. And we're going to put everything into a shaker. And by everything, there are a few things in this drink. Typically, you would make a batch version and you would let it sit for 1 to 2 hours before you would serve it. So this one may not have the full authenticity of the original. We'll try to go with that. Then we're going to put some cognac again. And by a little, I mean a lot. And then we're going to have some fun with some peach brandy. And now that we've had some rather rich alcohol between the rum and the cognac, we're going to try to lighten it up a bit with some lemon juice. And then also give it a bit of a sweetness with simple syrup. Get ready to put this in a rocks glass with some ice. You got to give credit to bartenders, by the way. By the time you put ice and a bunch of cold beverages into a shaker, your hands are frozen by the time you're done. So now we're going to have our wonderful Fish House Punch.
Cheers.
Cheers indeed.
You picked 3 very strong drinks. It's a good thing I'm eating. There was one drink on the list that actually involved fish brine. And I thought that would have also been perfect, since we've got, I believe this reading is about a kind of fishman bartender. So what did I call this? A bartender's shady business. So I want to try that drink someday, but I'm not sure where we're going to find the ingredients.
I may make it for you, but I will not have it.
Drop some sardines in there.
It's not going to happen. I'll be on the other end of the kitchen from that drink.
I'm going to enjoy it and tell you what you're missing. Go ahead, drink number 3.
Or reading number 3. It's the case maybe.
I'm curious, have you guys ever tried a Filipino spirit called lambanog?
No.
I don't think so. What's it
Yeah,
like?
could
What's
you
in it?
So it's sometimes called coconut vodka, right? Because it's made from the coconut sap.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and in this particular world, because I mentioned it's Southeast Asian, if you're rich enough to afford it, they drink rice wine, sake. But if not, they deal with the coconut sap spirit, the lambanog. And so that's the kind of a shady bar that they're in right here. It's like a riverboat
Okay.
in the dark, deep, nasty mangrove swamp. You only go there if you really don't want to be drawing attention to yourself. You mentioned earlier this, like, the richness of human experience and having different varieties in life. This main character here, her name is Daise, and she's the other big perspective in this book.
Okay.
And my inspiration for her, have you ever met that older woman who's like a waitress at a truck stop, and she's got like rich blue eyeshadow, and her name is like Dolores or something, and she's tough as nails because she's seen some stuff and lived through it, right? And she would love to be retired, but she's still on her feet because those are the cards that life dealt her. That's this character, Daise. She's had a rough, rugged past, and she's kind of a little bit of a pirate these days. That's what she's dealing with. And she's been picking up on some really scary gossip on the wharf of people going missing, of there being strange contracts being posted. And so she comes to this sketchy bar talking to her old friend Koji, trying to pump him for information. And that's the context here.
Okay.
Koji leaned forward on his forearms, glancing around the empty bar. I can tell you this much. I wasn't spinning no lies before. Those 3 missing minnows, that new monk contract, it's all related. Related, Daise scoffed. Oh, come off it. How could... And then she stopped. How'd you know about the monk contract? They ain't supposed to be posting that till morning. And yet you know about it, huh? Koji grinned. I guessed what blew you back to my counter as soon as you walked in. You've never been the only one cozy with the dock workers, Daise. The monks have been tossing the idea around for close to a week now, see? Finally made their decision at the last conclave, I think. Bounty will be posted at sunrise. All Daise could do was gape. She hated it. She hated being caught off guard. How do you know all this? Daise murmured, but she knew she didn't really want the answer. Koji took a deep breath and shrugged. I know because each of them missing minnows passed through my bar the day before they disappeared. The blood drained from Daise's face. What? You heard me, Koji said. Daise shook her head as she fastened her coin pouch back to her waist. The day before, huh? What an unfortunate coincidence. Coincidences are for stargazers and storm watchers, Cody said. And I ain't got time to keep an eye on heaven. Dig the pond, lure the fish. Daise slipped her knife from its sheath and started picking away at her cuticles. And what pond have you been digging, my little koi? Oh, sweet shells, Koji frowned. You know I'm too lazy to lift a shovel myself. Daise chuckled with an empty grin. She leaned forward on the counter until her nose was only a hand's breadth from Koji's. Then something fell right out of the tree and into your lap, huh? The bartender coughed uncomfortably, leaning back. The less you know, the better, sister. Trust me. Oh, I doubt that, Daise whispered, taking Koji's face in her hand. And we've already established just how much I trust your lion guts, eh? So tell me, what did the tide bring you, my little speckled koi? Koji pulled his face away and glared at Daise's weathered palm. But then he sighed. A few weeks back, a boat docked up next to mine. Real nice one. Baration. One of them soap shops, if you get my meaning. Daise understood the euphemism, but she wished she didn't. She'd sensed that there was something foul haunting the wharf, but this... She'd never suspected anything so terrible. Up north, sure, but not in Sote. Not this close to her shores. Her stomach capsized on her, but she grinned through it. Mighty bold of them, docking this close to Lunsot Sadagats, Daise mused. If the Bushi ever found out there were bottom feeders selling youth at their shores. Well, that's just the thing, sweet shells, Koji said. They ain't here to sell nothing, see. They came down to cast the net. Daisei's fingers tightened around her knife. How intriguing, she muttered to herself. So what then? They tossed you some coin to keep your mouth shut? Daisei hoped it was nothing more than that. She prayed to heaven above that her sweet, wily, foolish Koji wasn't more involved than that. But even as she said the words, she knew the truth of it. She could see it in his shifty eyes, hear it in the way he hesitated to respond. Don't be telling me, she groaned. The bartender let out an amused snort. You're anything but stupid, Daisei, so don't go faking the fool. That much money? Just to bind my lips? No. He shook his head and sighed again. No, they're interested in a much more long-term venture, see? They're needing a recruitment spot, someplace regular, where they can freshen up the wares each season. Koji chuckled bitterly to himself, wiping his face on the boozy rag. Half up front, the other half once they've restocked their cabins. That's about it then, he shrugged. Enough to quench those burning ears of yours? Oh, Koji Clay, Daisei muttered. Her whole body was starting to go numb. You went and got yourself all tied up in this too? Koji leaned forward again, taking up Daisei's untouched cup as he stared through the wall behind her. Now don't you go worrying about me, none, sister. A ship this big's got lots of rigging, you hear? Ain't no one but the hands themselves that know what's tied up to what. It's messy business for sure, but these sharks are professionals. Clever, vicious as they come. He took a sip from the glass and hissed as it hit his tongue. We'll be safe enough, especially now that we got your wits with us too, huh? Wind is with us, I think. Koji beamed across the counter at her. He wasn't drunk, but his eyes were glassy, his smile loose. His eyes used to be so deep and blue that Daisei could dive right into them. They were her private lagoon to his thoughts. She used to love those summer nights flirting at his bar, the hours and hours she spent trying to pick apart the frayed ends of his clever lies, the way he'd kiss her cheek when no one was looking. She loved him for his busy mind, for his syrupy words, for his rights, for his rights and replies. It wasn't too often that she found a friend that could keep up with her schemes. In a single, smooth motion, Daisei lifted her knife and went through Koji's palm.
Again, just wonderful. The eyes is a private lagoon. I mean, that's just you sort of hear some of the the idea of oh, her eyes were limpid pools, but the idea of what you just said there as a private lagoon was really, really neat, I found, and
Right.
very much counter to that awfulness that you can sometimes find
Right.
in literature.
And this reading to me raised the question of Koji is a bad guy, and yet he is someone that she loved. How do you teach your students not to write one-dimensional villains? I mean, I think there might be a time and place for them, but in general, how do you not write them one-dimensional, flat, just pure evil?
Well, that was something I really strived for with this book in particular. The title is Kindred Straits, and I was kind of playing with kindred spirits mixed with dire straits. These
Okay.
who'd never met, that are on these parallel journeys that are about to collide in really strange, horrifying ways, right? People that never would have met, but are actually kind of soulmates in a lot of ways, right? This crew coming together in these dire straits. And so I wanted that there be just a vast spectrum of perspectives, right? From like I said, the waitress at a truck stop all the way to Alenka, who is training to be, a sant working in a temple, right? I once heard, and this might have come, I think Ursula K. Le Guin talks about this in Steering the Craft as well, but it's this idea that no one sees themselves as the villain of the story, right? Everyone sees themselves as the hero, right? I've also heard too, I'm so sick and tired of the Dark Lord that wants to destroy the world. Like, who wants to destroy the world? That's where all your stuff is, right? We all have depth and motivations, and we all are struggling through the mortal coil, And Koji, I mean, like, there's been times in my life when I've done something incredibly selfish. There's times when I haven't been there for someone and I knew I should have, and and I felt my soul just decay. Like I felt cold inside about it, and I was trying to capture that in him, right? That he
Mhm.
knows he's done something horrific, and he's trying to talk himself as much as he is trying to convince her, you know. And I think that we all have those moments of empathy. And if you just like sit with them and expand them, right? Let that single moment consume you. That's what I try to do.
So in teaching writing, both, I think you teach English to high schoolers, you're an adjunct at a college. What do you find are some of the biggest difficulties for writers?
It's changed so much over the years.
Really?
Early on, I think the biggest challenge is the whole kill your darlings idea. That
Yep.
when you write something, it's so precious, it's on a pedestal, you don't want to admit that it's imperfect, you don't realize what you don't know yet. There's a famous quote that's write, keep writing, write a million words, throw them all away, now you're ready to start writing. And I hate
Right.
it because it's so personal and it came from me, right? But it's true, like when you're first starting to write, your job is not to become a great writer, or not to write a great book. It's to become a great writer. And the only way to become a great writer is by writing crappy books. It's the only
I
way.
like that.
You have to get it out of your system. You have to work through it. And it's not just to write the crappy book, but then to confront it again, to revise it, to take a crappy book
Yeah.
and into a decent book, and then a good book,
Right.
right? And it's miserable. And so I would say that was initially
Yes.
one, is people just don't want to invest the time into it. I think it's a lot
Mhm.
like cooking or music. You are a better listener of music than you are a performer of music. You're better at telling when food is good than making the delicious
Mhm.
food yourself, right? Just because you can identify quality doesn't mean you can produce it. We know that for music, we know that for cooking, but for some reason we think like, I speak English, I should be able to just vomit a book. And it's just
Mhm.
not the case, right? I would say the new problem is kids just don't read. The number of students
Yep.
I have that rely on AI summaries that don't even attempt to confront literature. Like, so it used to be they couldn't produce it, but they could identify when it was good writing.
Yeah.
Now they don't even read. They don't have they haven't consumed enough writing to be even to tell if it's good or not.
I find that an interesting point because he and I graduated 6 years apart, and I can see a clear difference in our education. When he talks about the things he learned and read and did in high school, I'm embarrassed. I mean, even at the time, even before I knew this, I don't even know if I read it or watched a movie, one Shakespeare. That's it through all of high school and college. I knew that I was not being taught, and still I read a lot on my own. We've been watching The Other Bennett Sister, and so I kind of looked up, what exactly is Pride and Prejudice about? I've never really read it, and yet I have read enough that I feel like I can recognize as good reading. I don't, I haven't read all the books through AI, but I see what you're saying, that these days kids might not be reading any books. They might be getting the entire everything just through a summary. And that's a huge lack.
Yeah, a lot of what you talked about in regards to literally writing a million words, throwing it away, and then starting your first story is reminiscent of a legend I've heard about Paul McCartney and John Lennon, in that they had written 300 songs together before they wrote their first song as a Beatle, as the Beatles. And so they threw out those first 300 awful songs, if you will. It really makes you wonder what was there. Because again, Paul McCartney and John Lennon, you're like, it couldn't have been bad, right? But yet then everything after that was absolute gold in everything that came out. And it's that idea of shredding your own work only to then birth real work from it, I think is very interesting.
Where can people find you online?
Go to my website, benjaminschwarting.com. Schwarting is an SCH because I'm German. I didn't live in Germany, but it was originally Schwarting, SCH.
Right.
Schwarting, yeah.
benjaminschwarting.com. You can also go to atoriumbooks.com. The Atorium is my fantasy universe. You can find all of my stuff there. My ebooks are published in most places, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo. I also have audiobooks for the first three Sum of Ages, print copies for the first three as well. The fourth book should be done. I'm literally one chapter away. I'm trying to write up the last chapter of book 4.
Very good.
You wouldn't believe, man, the weight a last chapter has, trying to tie up every single
Yes.
loose end. But yeah, my socials too. If you just search Benjamin Schwarting author, Facebook, Instagram.
Wonderful. You can find us at booksandbrews.net. You can find me and all my books at lauravosika.com, V as in Victor, OSIKA. You can find our sponsor, Gabriel's Horn Press, with lots of great authors at gabrielshornpress.com. And you can find all our wonderful animals, including the ram who trampled me, at glenmurrellfarms.wordpress.com.
Do you have any upcoming events, Ben?
I do actually. There is a Young Author Expo in Rigby, Idaho. I think it's in October that I'm going to be a speaker at. I'll also be on
Nice.
I'm going to be doing a presentation on the art of revision, how to make a good draft great. I think a lot of people, like, they write the book, they're like, cool, it's done now, and then they realize it's not and have no idea where to go. And I think that you need to sort of triage the process. If you sit and just reflect your prose over and over again, you're never going to actually revise the book.
Yeah.
Do we have any upcoming events? Or do you?
The only upcoming events I have are pulling weeds in the garden, dehydrating vegetables and herbs, mainly herbs.
Looking forward to more grandchildren.
Yes, we are. Was that a hint to kids? I don't know.
Oh, you didn't get the text?
No, we did not. So kids, if you want more grandchildren, okay, that's good.
Do we have anybody coming next month?
Yes.
Any chance, Laura?
So I was going to mention our recent guests have been Laura Cradle, who writes horror, Barry Black, the former FBI master bomb technician. We had fun talking to him. We just talked to Charles Graham about his Survive series. Coming up next month, we should be talking with Randy Lerch, who is a former Major League Baseball player, and we'll be talking about his memoir I believe it's about his life going a little bit off track and getting it back on the rails. So I'm looking forward to that. And it has been an absolute pleasure talking with you.
Cheers.
Cheers.